Hello, welcome back. We are here, we are back on the channel, and we are still talking about Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. And today, when we talk about this book, we need to talk about Okonkwo. We need to talk about him because he is central to understanding the book. He's at the heart of the whole thing. He's what the whole book is ostensibly about. So, who is Okonkwo? Well, let us turn to the very beginning of the book to find out. Achebe lays it out right at the beginning of chapter 1. He says this. Ready? Okonkwo was well known throughout the 9 villages and even beyond. His fame rested on solid personal achievements. As a young man of 18, he had brought honor to his village by throwing Amalinze the cat. Amalinze was the great warrior who for 7 years was unbeaten from Umuofia to Umbaino. He was called the cat because his back would never touch the earth. It was this man that Okonkwo threw in a fight which the old men agreed was one of the fiercest since the founder of their town engaged a spirit of the wild for 7 days and 7 nights. So, in the rest it continues to go on to outline Okonkwo's wrestling of the cat. But you get right there, that's who Okonkwo is. He is a man of action. He's a wrestler. He's a man of great physicality. He is a man who is well respected, right? When they say the old men agreed that this has been the greatest fight since not just a normal fight, but like this mythological foundational fight of a guy who wrestles with spirits. I mean, come on. His fame rested on solid personal achievements. So Okonkwo is not someone who's famous because his dad was famous or because people just like him. He has achieved things that you can name and you can enumerate. And that's who Okonkwo is. I think that's really, really important to know. It's a really important thing that Achebe has put in front of us right at the beginning, is this is who Okonkwo is. He is powerful. He exemplifies masculinity and achievement. In today's world, we would definitely call him a merit-based kind of guy. And so we see a lot of this throughout the book, that he treats people whom he perceives to be weak badly. He insults people who he thinks are weak or who are beneath him. He encourages violence when when there is a dispute with another village where two of the people of Umuofia are killed. Okonkwo's first thought is to go to war, and he's been to war. He's got skulls that he drinks out of. That's the kind of guy we're talking about. He has a gun that he keeps around the house. Not so surprising to us today, perhaps, if we're Americans, but nevertheless, in whatever this kind of mythological time is, that one of the interesting qualities of the book is we don't exactly know when it takes place until a little later, but nevertheless, he has a gun. When he talks to his son Noye, he wants his son to be masculine. He wants his son to be the kind of guy that he is, right? Like a lot of fathers do. He wants his son not to cry at things. He wants his son to be good with weapons and good at fighting and good at wrestling. That is what he wants. He wants respect. He wants the men of the village, the older men, the other men with titles, to respect him for his achievements. And he is a man with many titles, and which gives him respect and responsibility. He plays a very important role in the village when the Egwugwu come out. And the Egwugwu are these ancestral spirits of Umuofia. And they are, and this is something we can get into at another place maybe, in reality they are the important men of the village in costume. And they come out of the special hut. They come out in costume, in character, they render judgment, and they settle disputes among the people. And Okonkwo is one of those. So that's in reality, in the minds of the people, and when like so often happens when you are in the midst of a religious or cultural event, you sort of suspend disbelief in the same way that that guy in the chair isn't Santa, but you decide that guy in the chair is going to be Santa today. Kind of the same thing with Okonkwo as one of the Egwugwu. So I mean, that's the whole point. The whole point that Achebe is trying to make is that Okonkwo is incredibly powerful and well-regarded and well-known. He is one of the best that Umuofia has to offer. That's important. However, one of the reasons Okonkwo is the way he is because of his father. Now, his father was a man named Unoka, And Unoka was a gambler. He was in debt to a whole lot of people. He was a drinker. He was a layabout. He was a musician. He was just generally a sort of lazy, laid-back person who did not really make a name for himself, make a way for himself. He died in abject poverty of terrible sickness, and he had to be buried out sort of in the evil forest where you bury the sick and people who die of terrible diseases. He had even an ignominious death that made young Okonkwo think he does not want to be like his father. And the nature of this, because I mean, I'm sure a lot of guys kind of grow up thinking like, okay, I've seen the way my father is. I don't want to be like my dad. Not me. My dad's awesome. But for the rest of you, it's common among men, I think. And for some people, it manifests as kind of an ambition or a goal, right? To say, my father was this, therefore I'm going to be that. I will make the choice to be something different, right? But with Okonkwo, that choice is rooted not in the goal to be better. That choice is rooted in fear. And Achebe makes that pretty clear pretty early in the book. He makes it very clear that he's terrified of becoming like his father. And so any time Okonkwo encounters kindness or culture or music, or anytime Okonkwo runs into a scenario where he thinks my father would probably flourish in this situation, Okonkwo reacts very, very badly and very, very strongly. When he sees that his son, Noye, is enjoying time with the wives, with the mothers, and that Noye is listening to their stories, and Noye is being, let's call him a mama's boy for lack of any other term right now, he gets really, really angry because he sees in Noye, he sees his layabout dad. And Okonkwo's fear is this fear of being weak and being perceived to be weak. And for him, that means it pretty much means showing any emotion other than anger. Any other emotion than anger is weakness. He's afraid of looking bad in the community, that the people who respect him will see his father in him and that he will lose their respect. And so every drive, you can predict Okonkwo really, really well. Every drive of his is to fight this fear of weakness. And when he has a choice, he's always going to choose the choice that he thinks appears stronger. And that's where we get to Ikemefuna. As an aside, there is a question of whether Okonkwo is a tragic hero in kind of the classical sense. And I think he might be. Classical tragic heroes are people who are of high station, and they have some sort of error in judgment. They have a flaw that causes them to make bad decisions, and those bad decisions begin to compound and end in their eventual destruction. And I think to some degree Okonkwo is. He is afraid. He's afraid of being seen as weak. He's afraid of being seen as kind. And Ikemefuna is a hostage from another village who was brought to their village in exchange for the deaths of some of the Umuofians elsewhere. Okonkwo, being, of course, one of the top men of the village, agrees to foster Ikemefuna in his house until the village reaches a decision about what to do with him. And Ikemefuna becomes like a son to him. In fact, a better son than his own son, Noye. Where Noye is kind of soft and hesitant and weak, Ikemefuna is much more sort of martial and manlike and ready to go and have, fight and do stuff. And Okonkwo really, really likes Ikemefuna and really, really does see him as a son. And then the time comes when the village elders decide that Ikemefuna's fate has to be dealt with. And as part of the sort of the compensation for some of the people of Umuofia being killed, Ikemefuna has to be killed. And Okonkwo goes out with him, and Okonkwo decides to be the one to do it. He decides to be the one to kill this kid that he saw as his own son. In that scene in chapter 7, this moment reads like this. As the man who had cleared his throat drew up and raised his machete, Okonkwo looked away. He heard the blow. The pot fell and broke in the sand. He heard Ikemefuna cry, "My father! They have killed me," as he ran towards him. Dazed with fear, Okonkwo drew his machete and cut him down. He was afraid of being thought weak. Now, there's a discussion to be had. There's an argument to be made about what it means to be weak. And in that situation, what would have been the weak choice? And to my mind, you might disagree, but to my mind, the decision that Okonkwo made was weak. He acted out of fear. He acted because he was worried about what other people would think of him. He acted so that he would be seen the way he thought he wanted to be seen. I think the strong choice would have been to refuse, to say, no, Ikemefuna is my son for all practical purposes. Ikemefuna is a good kid. He will be a valued member of Umuofian society. Let's resolve this problem a different way. But killing him is a waste of life. That probably would have been the strong choice. But Okonkwo can't do that. He cannot, because for him, that is compassion. Sparing Ikemefuna would be an act of compassion, and for Okonkwo, compassion is weakness, and weakness cannot be abided. And so he kills Ikemefuna, and that just begins a cascade of events. It makes him miserable. It makes Nwoye terribly sad, because Nwoye and Ikemefuna were getting along gangbusters. And that will further erode the relationship between Nwoye and his father, which will eventually culminate in Nwoye leaving his father entirely, converting to Christianity and taking a new name and never really seeing his dad again. So these actions that Okonkwo takes, are rooted in this fear, and where he thinks this is the right thing to do, this is what will gain me notoriety, or at least this is what will keep my reputation. Every one of these acts that he does out of fear are acts that eventually lead to his destruction. Not necessarily the destruction of Umuofia. He can't control that. He does not have any control over the missionaries and the colonizers and all that. But in terms of himself and how his life goes on to the end of the book, he destroys himself the same way that Willy Loman destroys himself, the same way Oedipus destroys himself. Okonkwo does that. He takes these actions that are rooted in bad decisions and bad philosophies, and he comes to a bad end. So I think that, and again, that's another really great example of Achebe being very clever, because he is taking a Western literary tradition that will be really familiar to his Western readers and mapping it onto Okonkwo, because a lot of the readers that he's trying to reach probably have great respect and great thought for, your Hamlets and your Shakespeare, your Shakespeares and your Sophocleses and all of them. And Achebe is like, look, we have the same stories, right? The people of my people have the same stories. We have the same reactions. We have tragic flaws just the same way all of your literary heroes do. So again, kind of appealing to that common humanity. And I think by rooting Okonkwo in fear of failure and fear of being seen as not manly enough or masculine enough, again, is a trait that is so common, that is everywhere. You see it today. You see people who are worried that they won't be seen manly as being enough of a man. And how do they define man? They define being a man as being tough, as not showing feelings, as taking all of your emotions and shoving them into a little box, as being maybe violent and aggressive. That is the manhood that they see as being correct. And I think what Achebe is showing us with Okonkwo is that kind of manhood, that kind of masculinity is poisonous. It will destroy you. And you won't even know it's happening until it's too late. Because every action you think is like, I'm being a man, I'm doing what men should do. And every time you base a decision in that, you are ruining the lives of yourself and your family and the people around you. And so for me, when I think about Okonkwo in this story, he's an object lesson for all of us. And I think not just men. I'm sure women make bad choices too, very often born out of fear. I think Okonkwo is a really good warning for anybody who reads the book, that making decisions that are rooted in fear are never decisions that are going to bear out well. Sure, Okonkwo gets some kind of short-term benefit by being a man of titles in Umuofia, by being a man who is well respected by everybody. But if you continue down this path, it's going to end poorly. And we see that. throughout the whole book. So I think when you read Things Fall Apart, it is important to follow Okonkwo's logic and try to understand why he does things the way that he does and what Achebe is saying about making those decisions. And you can kind of then reflect on yourself and say, all right, when have I acted out of fear? When have I made choices that maybe were not choices that were positive, but were because I was afraid of something? And how have those choices resulted for me? So that's one of the big things I really get out of this book. And it's one that I like, especially because I teach teenagers. I teach high school students. And high school students, let's be fair, high school students, teenagers, are little bundles of terror. They are afraid of everything. They're afraid of being ostracized from their friends. They're afraid of their future, maybe rightfully so. They're afraid of failing exams. They're afraid of looking stupid in front of their friends. I remember being a teenager, I was scared all the time, even if I didn't admit it to myself. There were so many things that I was afraid of, which of course today I look back on and go, why were you afraid of that? That was utterly meaningless. But in the moment, it was really meaningful. And so whenever I teach this book, I kind of like to try to get my students to reflect on that. Like, again, how many of your decisions are being made out of fear because you are worried about how other people are going to look at you or how other people are going to see you versus the kind of person you really want to be and the person you really could be if you just let go of that. So those are my thoughts on Okonkwo as the central character of the book and how that drives sort of his fear drives the whole plot. He is a really neat guy. I don't think I would get along with him. I don't think I'd enjoy having lunch with him because I don't really relate that well to the sort of hyper macho guy. But I think he's well worth reading. But anyway, thank you for coming back. Thank you for coming and sticking around to talk to me about Okonkwo. If you've read the book and if you would like to talk about Okonkwo and what you see in him, please put that in the comments. That would be great. If you have any thoughts on toxic masculinity, which wasn't really a thing, or at least not a phrase, I think, when Achebe wrote the book, put those in the comments too. How do you see yourself in Okonkwo at all? Do you see yourself maybe using him as an object lesson about what not to be? I don't know. It's up to you. But thank you for coming around. I really appreciate that. We'll do some more videos and I will see you next time.